Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for the organization for allowed to stay today here with us. My English is not very good, but I intend to speak in English. Well, when the people speak about the sustainability, many people think in the duck, in the vineyard, on the corn, cow corn in the vineyard, but now Spain is the most important vineyard in the world, but is the first producer of ecological wine in Spain, and is the first in Europe. And we have now 120,000 hectares of ecological vineyard in the world. It's the most important hectare in the world, and is the 35% of the total vineyard in the ecological vineyard in the world. But when you study the history of the viticulture in Spain, we have a very good chain and other not too very good chain. For example, the localization of the vineyard. 50 years ago, the most important plantation of vineyard is normally in poor soils, very small, deep soil, and with a lot of stones. But this is a vineyard planted for my great-grandfather in 1906. It's 115 years old, and you can see this is a very, very vertical and the poor soil. But today, it's very usual, this other picture. You can see vineyard and together potatoes. 100 years ago, a soil or is for potatoes or is for vineyard. No, it's together. But today, it's together. It's not a very good evolution. No? But another problem in our evolution is the clones we use in the plant of the vineyard. For example, today there are many clones selected for your have a lot of yield, a lot of production, and it's necessary a new chain of this selection for clones with more sustainability, more quality, with small grapes, small berries, and more anthocyanins and more color. But for example, you can see two different Tempranillos. Tempranillo is the most important red variety in Rioja in Spain. You can see this is, for example, Tempranillo for a clone, new clones, and the other is for a vineyard of 100 years old. No? This is the same as Tempranillo, but the wine is possible to make with these grapes is very, very different. No? We need Tempranillos like this. No? It's possible to cut with a hand, with small berries, small grapes. But the normal you found in the market is these clones with a big grapes and a big berries. And another chain in our evolution is the number of the varieties we grow. For example, this is my doctoral thesis. In 1912, we have in Rioja 44 different varieties. But in 2000, we have only 7, and 3 of these is more than 96% of Rioja. This is a big problem because we have many varieties 100 years ago, but it's no normal now. Today, in the world, there are 6,154 different varieties. 6,154 different varieties. But in my opinion, only 40 of these varieties make more than 80% of the wine in the world. It's necessary to make an opportunity to the other varieties. Yes, why these varieties is missing? You can see with this picture. On the left, Maturana Blanca, one variety we found 30 years ago. And on the right, the most important variety in Rioja in Spain is Viura or Macabeo, and it's big grapes and big berry. Yes, this problem is the genetic erosion. Today have less varieties growth, and everybody plant the same varieties and only plant a few clones. For example, for Tempranillo, only 2 clones in all Spain. Today there are less gens to vines to 100 years ago. Another problem is with the pewees varieties is a mix for hybrid on Vitis vinifera and Vitis americana and other different vines. But the problem is not the research, the investigation. I think is very good. But the problem is when these varieties use the same name, put Merlot, Tempranillo, but no, I agree with the evolution, but it's no possibility to use the same name when it's changed the gens. Okay, it's very important. Another change in our viticulture is about the preparation of the plant of the vineyard. No? Yes, today there are many big machine. It's possible to make very deep products, very deep plantation, and this is not very good for our soils. Another change in our vineyard is our young. Now we have more young vineyard than 50 years ago, no? And today it's possible to see the vineyard, the old vineyard, but this is very good for the very good wines. But for example, this is Rioja. We have in 1983 we have 34% of our vineyard is more than 40 years ago, and in 2014 we have less than 10%. No? This is normal in Spain and in all viticulture. But the problem is the cost of produce 1 kilo of vine, of the grapes in a very old vine, because the cost is minimum €1 up to €3.5 per kilo, because it's very difficult to grow. Another change is the reduction of the work in the vineyard. You can see in 100 years ago, we have less than 600 hours per hectare for growth our vineyard. And today it's possible with 150 hours with harvest machine, etc. In this vineyard is necessary, this photograph is more than 100 years ago, is necessary 600 for the growth. But for example, this vineyard is planted for my great-grandfather, and it's not possible to introduce the tractor, and you need more than 500 hours per hectare. And this other vineyard is Cerro La Isa, planted for my great-grandfather, and it's necessary to work with horse because it's not possible to work with other, and you need more than 600 hours per hectare. In the last 30 years, we changed the objective, viticultural objective. For example, 30 years ago, the objective of the viticulture is increase the grapes, increase the berry, increase the yield, the production of the vineyard. Today, it's changed. Make small grapes, small berry, and less production. No? But this is the evolution. For example, in Rioja, we have 2.5 more production than 25 years ago. And this photograph is very usual in Rioja when you don't use every grapes you produce. It's necessary to left. And this is the Tempranillo we love for the enologies with small grapes, small berries. But when you speak about the quality wines, it's necessary not only quality wine, it's necessary to quality wines make in respect to environmental. For example, this is the problem, more than 3,100 hectares with problem with nitrate. Nitrate is a fertilizer. And for example, in the world, the vineyard is only 3% of the sulfide, mondial sulfide, but use 20% of the fungicide or pesticides of tall growth. For example, in Rioja, more than double that the median of Spain, because it's very normal when you pay a lot the grapes, the people use more pesticide and more fertilizer. The problem in the world, in my opinion, is the decrease to the consume, a lot production in the vineyard, but all the problem is the climate change. For example, this is the problem. Every year we have the harvest more early. And for example, Chardonnay du Pape, we have 3 weeks before the harvest than 60 years ago. And this is the evolution, in my opinion, of the viticulture. At the beginning, at the beginning of the 20th century, the traditional viticulture have less production, only use Manitou, only use copper and sulfide, don't use herbicides. But this changed more or less in 1960, and to conventional viticulture with high production, with use of herbicides, pesticides, and have more production. No? And change for viticulture ecological, we have less, it's the same viticulture to the traditional viticulture, but the people think ecological wine is new. No, it's not new. It's only every wines 100 years ago is ecological. All the wines before the use 1960. This vineyard is ecological wine. But normally, one vineyard have more than 20 sprays to the vineyard to make grape. But it's necessary to make wine without residue of pesticides. For example, there are now techniques in the wineries for washing the grapes because have problem with the pesticides in the grape. This is a winery in Rioja with a technique system for washing the grapes. But there are many studies to the residue pesticides in the wines, and it's necessary to make a reflection about this. Ecological vineyards don't use herbicides, don't use pesticides, and only natural pesticides. But for example, the ecological wine have more resveratrol in white and in red than conventional viticulture. Resveratrol is a phytoalexin, is perfect for our health. And this is the best pest of the Rioja. This fly have a damage to the grapes, and it's possible to use, for example, insecticide, or this other thing is chained with a pheromone, and it's more easy to combat. And this is another problem in our vineyard. There are many grass, but it's not natural grass because this grass is resistant to the herbicides and is more easy to see in Rioja now because 50 years ago it's not possible to find because it's a consequence to the use the herbicides. No? And this is the word of the line for not use herbicides, but it's very expensive, no? Because, for example, the ecological viticulture is very expensive compared to conventional. This is you compare the cost in Rioja, conventional and ecological cost for kilo, and you need more hours for time. The ecological wine have less sulfide than the conventional does, and it's possible to make wine without sulfide, and it's very difficult, but it's possible, and I think with more investigation is more easy. No? And the other problem is there are many stamps for the different ecological wine. It's only 1 minute, and it's possible now with only one stamp. Spain exports more than 80% of the ecological wine, and it's increased the consumption. But the ecological wine is a wine with less sulfide, less pesticide, more resveratrol, and it's a new market and more natural wine. It's a wine with less use to carbon, and the future, I think, is increase the agricultural ecological, but very slowly, not very easy. But you have problem with DDT. Now in Rioja is only 3.5% of the total viticulture, and in Europe with the first produce, and it's increased the consumption of ecological wine in Rioja, and this is the strategic market project in Rioja, and you increase the organic wine and less to the sulfite. And this is the problem. There are many vineyards in Europe when the normal life is 25 years. But for example, this wine planted for my great-grandfather is 115. This is sustainable. The most sustainable vineyard is the oldest vineyard. And I think with Liz, with Shane, thank you so much. Sorry for the time. Okay. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, still. My name is Marc Roberts. I'm Director of Sales for a family-run business called Lanchester Wines. We are, as previously stated, based up in the northeast. We are a family business that started with its hearts in in being wine merchants and selling wine. And as the time has gone on, the industry's changed. The family, Tony and Veronica Cleary, have spread and understood the sort of diversity of what we need to be doing in wine. I'll take you through a quick presentation on how we are, where we are, a very short journey of where we've got to with regards to our focus now on sustainability. And then I think it'd be more prevalent when we sit down with Felicity a lot, certainly from my point, as opposed to a winemaker. So if we go through who we are. So we have Wine Fusion, a colleague of mine will be doing tastings later, Andrew Porton, he'll come in, he'll be working with us. Lanchester Wines, which is a division that I look after and run. Greencroft Bottling is our sister company. And Lanchester Properties and Energy sit alongside our gifting business. The interesting thing for today really is more about Lanchester Energy, which is really, really important to where we're going on this journey. We're based up in the northeast. I will flick through these quite quickly. I don't want to bore you very much with the geography of the northeast. So we are based up in the northeast. We started working, and one of the primary things that we do at the Lanchester Group of companies is we are completely, I'm going to get shot by my PR person now, but carbon minus. We are carbon net neutral in what we do. So our bottling facility will do circa about 120 million litres this year in the UK. And all of that energy that's used to work with that is all offset with our wind farm that is based in the northeast on our properties. So that being part one of what we do with regards to solar and ground source heat pump energy, which I'll talk about in a moment. So the journey so far is we want to focus on clean, renewable energy, hugely important to us and what we do at the core. We're always looking to the future. Tony and Veronica constantly reinvest into the business with regards to new technologies, new equipment, to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of what we do with regards to sustainability globally. This is a really awful picture of part of our thing. It's not very beautiful there. It normally is, I can assure you. But this is a part of the original factory of where we started, where the bottling's facilitated. And we have two, as you can see there, 500 kilowatt turbines with the tertiary one just out of shot there. So on site, as it said, 300 kilowatt, 3 times 500 kilowatt. We basically, it's up to 6 million kilowatts of energy a year we generate from our business. Now, I'm not sure if that translates. So it's what we need to do and how we use it. We use currently about 42% of the energy we create, we make, and then the rest of it is put through. So effectively, in thinking about it in sort of an easy term, it will power up to about 800 three-bedroom houses for a year. I'm not sure if that translates very well, but it's an interesting stat to try and get across the point. Solar, we've got 41 kilowatt solar array on what we do in the business. I think solar is a very, very fantastic sort of established now technology for sustainability with regards to it. Lots and lots of wine companies, producers, vineyards use a lot of solar. Something we're focused on, and it's very important to what we do. We actually have 3 sites based in, so we have just over 1.5 million square foot of property. That was important to us in the head office where we have the wind turbines, and we're very mindful of the fact that not everywhere can have wind turbines. It's not exactly an easy thing to do. So what we try to do, or what we succeed in doing, is looking at other technologies. So with regards to our other, there's a famous river called the Tyne in the northeast. So these two properties here are based next to the Tyne. And what we did, our Director of Energy, and Adam Black and Tony and Veronica, we started looking at other sources of energy, reusable energy. So we worked on a ground source heat pump. So effectively, and forgive me if some of you guys know more than I do on this, it wouldn't be hard. What we do is we take water from the table, the ground table through a bore, we pull it up at about 1,000 litres per second. We take out a couple of degrees of heat, of energy on that, and we put it back into the water table. And what that allows us to do across our warehouses is completely heat them. So several 100,000 square feet is completely kept, well, perfect temperature for wine, but it's all done through the sustainable note. So the heating energy bill, again, it's mitigated out. So again, it's looking at where we are with geographically and how can we achieve what we need to achieve with regards to really trying to push our sustainability. We also work across, I mean, this is slightly more of a corporate presentation, but we work across the usual. We work with LEDs, we work with motion sensor lighting, the sort of stuff that is now, thank God, becoming quite commonplace in the workplace. A lot of the stuff we do is working with Port of Tyne and versus locally, because where we are, if you imagine that's the UK, we're up in the northeast. We use the Port of Tyne, and we have a lot more efficient ratios with regards to other UK customers that bring in from the south coast with regards to shipping bulk. So basically, there's a lovely little line here. So sustainability practice in Greencroft. We've basically saved close to 11, nearly 12,000 tonnes of carbon so far is what we've managed to save and what we do with our projects, sustainability causes, and more importantly, the ethics of the owners. And we've generated enough clean energy to power 60,000 houses in the UK. So it's just about finding that term that we can start relating to the consumer, that they understand what we're doing with regards to sustainability in the business. I appreciate that's quite quick. I'm sure Felicity will open the floor up in a bit, but if any more questions you want to bring on there, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Right, I'm just going to start off with a couple of questions. Mark, so that's a tremendous amount of bottling. How does it intersect with bulk wine?
Well, I mean, simply put, the initial point of bulk wine, although the name doesn't really invoke a lot of love, does it? But the initial point with bulk wine was about efficiencies, if we think about it really in a commercial sense. So with regards to the efficiencies on bulk, it is primarily from our point as a business, New World. And the sort of link of bringing it through, we obviously know about the benefit of wine being moved in larger format. The actual impact of what that does with regards to shipping lines is intrinsically linked to the efficiency ratios. We have a great stat on it, and it's approximation, but 1 tank of wine brought in bulk versus, and we'll get onto the sort of sustainable packaging side, but there's a great stat, I only heard this the other day, that 1 tank of 24,000 litres of wine, if it was put into glass versus to put into can, there's a saving of circa 25 tonnes of glass for 1 tank. So if we start to sort of extrapolate that out, and you look at why bulk is so important for sustainability, then, like I said, through the forethought, I should say, of Tony and Veronica, who sadly can't be here, when you add the turbines, the energy, it makes it a lot more circular, as the point of the title.
And how much do the end customers care about this? How much is this part of the story, and how much of it is you're doing it because it's the right thing to do and because it saves you energy?
I think there's a journey. I think when we first started off in this, the end consumer, I think they liked the idea of sustainability wind power. I think it was a nice thing to think about. I think certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, it's become hugely important for the consumer. I think it's become hugely important for corporate, but there is a disconnect between corporate and buying and consumer. So it is important. You speak to anybody here, and we're all sat here, you speak to any consumers, any customers, any producers, sustainability is really high up on their list. We do on occasion have a struggle where how that translates down to actually a buying mechanic or a KPI. But we are seeing a distinct shift now. So it's becoming very important.
So when did you see this shift starting to happen?
It's a funny one. There's a couple of anecdotes around that. There's always been a want and a desire, but if I'm really honest, I would say it's the last 3 years, really, that there's been a real connect for the motion to start getting on, and actually, and a real desire from across the sort of chain of command, would it be in a consumer or a customer base.
Right, does anybody have any questions? Got a completely silent room, so I'm going to have to keep talking. Okay, I'm really interested in that. Yeah.
I need to hear you.
Now it's working. For Mark, I have a question. Do you get any subsidies from the government or any incentives?
Not personally, no. Very good question. We certainly did originally in the UK, and forgive me, I'm moderately ignorant to the rest of Europe and the world on this, but we did originally there was a huge benefit for solar. That was huge, so you saw a lot of domestic solar going on and commercial solar. A lot of those tariffs have now gone. For sure, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying exactly what we do with regards to wind turbine, but mostly because I don't know the answer, if I'm honest, and I'd rather give you facts. I can follow up on it. But we're now we've broken ground on a 250,000 square foot purpose-built bottling hall, which is going to be absolute state-of-the-art. We've gone down to the finest levels of sustainability on this, so working with cladding, underground source heating, battery storage. With regards to that stuff, there's more of it's not so much a government subsidy per se, but there is facilities that allow us to have such creativity on sustainability. Have I answered that, or is it wishy-washy?
More or less. And I have the same question for Juan Carlos.
I think... sí. No he entendido muy bien la pregunta que era... sí.
No he hecho atento.
Can you repeat the question, please? Okay.
I wanted to ask if you get also money from the Spanish government to implement more environmental practices in the vineyard?
No. Yes, it's the same. Because it's incredible because the government pay money to change the oldest vineyard to new vineyards. And it's normally a vineyard is probably to life 150 years old. And now it's only live 25 years, median age to is pick up. And it's necessary to pay money to conserve the oldest vineyard, because in my opinion it's the best to don't use more CO, and it's necessary for the future, because the most sustainable is the oldest vineyard. And it's incredible, but the government pay money for the opposite.
Sharon.
Thank you. Hi, my question is for Mark. I was just wondering, if you wanted to be more sustainable than you are now, would you, or are you considering shifting your sourcing from the New World to countries that are closer to the UK?
Good question. Yes, I mean, the predominance of New World is the efficiencies of commerciality originally, and it happens to work. We do source, my colleague who will be on after, Andrew Point particularly, we do source, and there is a much more of a focus on looking at closer markets, Spain being one. Yes, it's of importance. We are seeing a distinct change in shift in bulk. So, for example, a lot in Eastern Europe now, we do way more than we ever thought there, and it does have a proactive nature with regards to that output. But we're also sort of working back as well. So we're pushing back with every producer that I keep pointing to you, I don't work, sorry, but every producer that we work with, there really is an ethical sort of test, and our purchasing director, Leslie Cook, and I are very, very focused. And so if we work with a company called Matetic over in Chile. So we audited their winery, we looked at their practices, we looked at their water practices and what they're doing. So we can have a bit of an ethic. There's no point us being like, you know, all wind-powered and brilliant and aren't we great and happy-clappy when we're working with wineries that are just, you know, wasting it everywhere. So we are pushing it back. So a lot of that is bringing it closer, for sure. We're working a lot with the major shipping lines to understand what their practice is doing, because the dream would be able to actually have a bottle from wherever and actually give you an exact carbon statement on that bottle, and that's something we're really keen to push forward. I mean, it takes time. There's a lot of moving parts, if you excuse the pun.
I've got a question about that. If you're moving to, you know, source more locally and move to the east, how responsive is the market? How much can you just say, actually, we're going to take less Australian, less New Zealand, and we're going to go to Moldova?
It's an interesting one. You know, I mean, it's such a spectrum, and when we're not talking about an Albarino here that we can get from Australia, or we can get from, if you look at the super varietals, a Pinot Grigio, a Malbec, a Chardonnay, whatever, there's not really much. We went through a phase when in Italy, obviously PG went through the roof a good few years ago, and we moved our production or our sourcing over to Australia, and there was very little pushback, and the wines was sold in some rather salubrious places. That then moved on with the vintage. Now we do actually work with Moldovan producers. So on what we call ourselves like a super varietal, which is a bit cheesy, I suppose, but with a super varietal like a Pinot Grigio. So if you think about it, you go into a bar anywhere, people don't say anymore, can I have an Italian, a Trentino Pinot Grigio? They say, can I have a glass of Pinot Grigio? And therefore then that allows us to be a little bit more responsive to the market with commercially, yeah, but also for sure with regards to supply.
Yeah, it works. Actually, I'm one of the suppliers from Moldova. Just the question is completely different. You mentioned just like you touched the point, the sustainable packaging.
Yes.
What are you planning to do that? Because I think it's one of the less touched part of the oldest part of sustainability. Because the glass is everywhere and it's having a lot of CO2 emissions, and I don't see, at the moment at least, any possibilities to change or any options to change this, except of maybe frugal. But if you want, you know that frugal bottle.
Oh, sorry, yes, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
It's great. The packaging angle to it is absolutely paramount. We were one of the first to have a Tetra Pak line in the UK, and I don't think we did hardly any of it. So what we learned from that is it needs to be designed by the consumer. So with regards to, I mean, I gave you that stat earlier about the 20 odd tons worth of saving. What we're seeing now is a distinct move. We're seeing things like, I had a meeting this morning for enough about bib. And the quality of bib now, you know, like the packaging, it looks cool.
Bag in box.
Oh, bag in box. Yeah, sorry, bag in box. You know, they're putting great juice in it. You know, I'm specifically speaking from the UK market, so forgive me. And it was always a bit naff. But now that you've seen these great producers come in with great packaging, great juice, inspirational juice. The big thing we think and we're seeing is cans. It really is. For the recycling nature of it, we obviously have an issue with regards to mindset. You know, is somebody going to have a high-altitude Malbec or a beautiful Pinot Grigio from Moldova out of a can? So we're kind of thinking how we position this. Now, obviously, the logic there would be airlines, because we're going to play on the corporate responsibility, because it is hugely important. So if you look at that glass wastage, amount and weight with regards to airlines, and we're hoping that will be one of the forerunners to sort of, you know, you've got a pretty captive audience on a flight. And then a lot of arenas and festivals and these sorts of things now becoming so much more sustainably focused, and it's really important that their supply base has a statement on it, and we're seeing that can. So for sure, bag-in-box is on the increase because it's great. We are looking at lighter weight bottles in glass. But I think can will be the biggest transition, he says, in statement now on camera, and it probably won't.
How much do you think people, I mean, I find packaging really interesting because on the one hand, glass seems really recyclable, but then you rip up beaches to do it, and coloured glass is not that recyclable. Cans are hugely recyclable, but bauxite mining is terrible. So how do you actually work out how sustainable a package is?
It depends on your producer. So you have to have an ethical audit in what we do, which is what we do, and that would be more of our bottling business, Greencroft. So we do a lot of sustainability audits on our producers. A lot of them have statements. Yes, some of it can be quite disruptive. Most of the products that we work with, we're talking about can now, yeah? We're looking at most of it's recycled up to about 87% actual recycled can tin. So we try as hard as we can to work with these guys and make sure that the sort of pushback or push down, we have a clear line of sight on that.
Interesting. Okay, any more questions? Yes.
I have a question for all you panelists. Are consumers driving sustainability in the wine world, or can you say the wine world is already advancing on sustainability and the consumers follow?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the markets that I know about, like everything in wine, it depends on the consumer that you're talking about and the consumer segment. There's a growing, especially in the United States, there's rapidly growing specialty businesses in natural, biodynamic and organic, where there are people who will not drink anything that doesn't fall into those categories. It's still a really small section of the market. It's probably less than 5%. But people are certainly getting more concerned that something says it's sustainable, whether it's sustainable or not.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a meeting in the middle. It has, as I said, last 3 years it's gone crazy with regards to, I think, social media adds to this, you know, the access to information that's immediate. I do think it's being led primarily by consumer on other industries. I mean, in the UK, there was a thing where there was a cauliflower steak. Forgive me, I'm not very good at this international thing. And it created havoc with the packaging for a piece of cauliflower. And it was, ironically, or whichever way you want to look at it, that started to get the Gen X and the millennials or whatever really hyped up about it. So from that side, there was a bit of push. Social media's played a great part. And then, yeah, for sure, the PLCs, you go to any major business now, they'll have a sustainability statement on there. So I think it's kind of both, really. And it's, again, another weak answer, but I really do believe it's a meeting of minds.
In Spain, for example, it's increased the consumption of ecological product, not total of the wine. For example, in Spain, the last year with the COVID, is increased the consumption of ecological product and a little only ecological wine. And today in Rioja is only 3.5 production, and in Spain is probably about the 7% only the consume of ecological wine in the total market, but it's increased year to year.
Right, I think we've come to the end of our seminar. Thank you very much, everybody, especially our two wonderful speakers, and thank you to the audience for making this a very lively discussion.